If you've ever planned an event or coordinated a family meal or had to form a team, like a Frisbee team or a Frisbee game, right? Or served in any kind of leadership role, whether large or small, you know that you cannot please everybody. You cannot please everyone. Leadership is not for the faint of heart, regardless of how large or small that leadership role is. Leaders are heroes to some and villains to others. Heroes to some and villains to others. We see that play out today in our divided society. Leaders are praised or criticized at the same time for the same action. If this is the reality in our culture, how do we live in unity as God's people? How do we do that? How do we lead towards authentic unity? Or is authentic unity even possible? In the ancient city of Corinth, the church was divided over leadership. Some like Paul, others favored Apollos, others were into Apostle Peter, and some said we only listen to Jesus. The situation was actually critical. To encourage authentic unity, Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the church, which became part of our modern-day Bible. It's in the New Testament, and it's labeled 1 Corinthians, or 1 Corinthians, or Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. And we've been studying this ancient letter for the last 6 weeks and finding it extraordinarily relevant to our 21st century context. If you've missed a previous message on Authentic Unity series that we've been doing, you can find it on our YouTube channel. And if it's helpful to you, by all means, subscribe to that. Today, however, we are in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, and that is 1 Corinthians chapter 4, starting with verse 1, and we're going to go 13 verses, 1 through 13. 1 Corinthians 4, verses 1 through 13. Let's consider what the text says. Verse 1. This then is how we ought to regard, how you ought to regard us, as servants of Christ and as those entrusted with the mysteries God has revealed. Now, it is required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. I care very little if I'm judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that doesn't make me innocent. Okay, first of all, isn't that interesting? Did you catch that? In other words, what Paul is saying just because Paul had peace about it, it didn't make it right. Some Christians take, I have peace about it, as the end-all proof of the right course, but it's not. Paul says, my conscience is clear, but it does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me. Therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in the darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. At that time, each will receive their praise from God. Now, brothers and sisters, I have applied these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, so that you may learn from us the meaning of the saying, do not go beyond what is written. Now let me do a quick pause here, because there's a translation awkwardness. There's a translation awkwardness in this text right here. The main idea, however, is not affected. So the main idea is solid. Now, without going into the linguistic details, Paul is not quoting a proverb. Paul is not quoting a proverb. The meaning of the verse is, Paul is saying, I have applied these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit, so that you may learn from us what it means to not go beyond what we wrote to you earlier. That's what it means. Then, the text continues, then you will not be puffed up in being a follower of one of us over against the other. For who makes you different from anyone else? What do you have that you did not receive? And if you did receive it, why do you boast as though you did not? Already you have all you want. Already you have become rich. You have begun to reign, and that without us. How I wish that you really had begun to reign, so that we also might reign with you. For it seems to me that God has put us apostles on display at the end of the procession, like those condemned to die in the arena. We have been made a spectacle to the whole universe, to angels as well as to human beings. We are fools for Christ, but you are so wise in Christ. We are weak, but you're so strong. You are honored, yet we are dishonored. To this very hour we go hungry and thirsty. We're in rags. We are brutally treated. We are homeless. We work hard with our hands. When we are cursed, we bless. When we are persecuted, we endure it. When we are slandered, we answer kindly. We have become the scum of the earth, the garbage of the world, right up to this moment. Well, that's the end of verse 13. So let me summarize the text. This is sort of what it's saying. Paul addresses the leaders, he addresses leaders and leadership in the context of authentic unity, and says, be careful when you judge ministry. Be careful when you judge ministry. Verse 5, it's best to wait and let the Lord sort it out. Paul also offers himself and Apollo as examples, and then details how they lived a very public life. They've been criticized as fools, right? In our modern vernacular, we don't are fools, right? Stupid people, or there's been fools. They've been criticized as weak leaders. They've suffered hardships. They've been mistreated, and they've worked hard. Now, because in a divided community, because leaders are both either exalted or criticized, and because ministry leaders have been entrusted by God with the message of the gospel, they ought to remain humble and not rely on their own judgment or the judgment of others to evaluate ministry success, even after they pray and somehow have peace about it. That's the message of this passage. That's this passage in a nutshell. What does this mean for us? What does this mean for us? What it means is that our ministry assessments require a large dose of caution. If Apostle Paul did not feel qualified to judge the effectiveness of his own work, why do you think we can do a better job? Why do you think we can do a better job? Paul's instructions to the Corinthian church are relevant for us today. There's 3 simple instructions. 3 very simple instructions, but it's hard to put into practice. Here's the simple instructions. Be faithful to Jesus. Stay humble. And stop judging churches, ministries, and leaders. Be faithful, stay humble, and stop judging churches, ministries, and leaders. Be careful not to over-evaluate or under-evaluate. Actually, better yet, don't evaluate. Don't evaluate. Wait until the Lord comes. That's what Paul said. This is what Paul is saying. But what did Paul do? If that's what he said, what did he do? Well, Paul offered more than just words of instructions. Paul offered himself and Apollos as examples of godly leaders to the church in Corinth, who was in desperate need of authentic unity. In our text today, I found seven leadership examples for authentic unity, which I would like to share with you today. Yes, I did say 7, and I plan to go through them very fast. So grab a pen and paper and mark these down. Grab a pen and paper. I'll go through them quickly, but you reflect on them slowly. I'm going to go through it quickly, but you reflect on these slowly, so write these down. Number one, Paul and Apollos were authentic. Verse 6, I have applied these things to myself and Apollos for your benefit. See, Paul is living by his own instructions. Too many Christians today live by the motto, do as I say, not what I do. Do as I say, not as what I do. See, Paul's video matched his audio. He lived what he said, and he said what he lived. Authenticity. Number 2, Paul and Apollos were servants. They were servants. Verse 9, God has put us apostles on display, like slaves condemned to die. See, Paul paints this vivid picture, and if you close your eyes, you can just see the procession, and then these at the end are the people that are taken to the arena to be executed. These are slaves, or to fight in the arena and then die. There's a vivid picture here, and interestingly enough, Paul is not bitter about it. He doesn't say, "Why me, God? I've been so faithful to you. Why me? Why are you putting me through this difficulty?" See, Paul accepts the lordship of Jesus in all circumstance. He is a true servant. Servanthood. Number 3, Paul and Apollos were transparent. Verse 9, we have been made a spectacle to the whole universe. Imagine the whole universe knowing every single thing about you. Paul and Apollos were living a life out in the open. There was nothing hidden because there was nothing to hide. A recent statistic showed that 65% of pastors feel their family lives are in a glass house and fear they're not good enough to meet expectations. A glass house. Transparency. Number 4, Paul and Apollos were countercultural. They were countercultural. Verse 10, we are fools, we are weak, we are dishonored. These aren't the kinds of things in our culture we esteem. Right? Weakness is not esteemed in our culture, and neither was in Paul's culture. Godly leadership can appear foolish and can appear weak because it does not fight in the same way as conventional wisdom would suggest. Spiritual wisdom, my friends, spiritual leadership uses different methods and different tools. We need more servant leaders who have the courage to be relevant and countercultural. Relevant and countercultural. Number 5, Paul and Apollos were sacrificial. Verse 11, hungry, thirsty, in rags, brutally treated, and homeless. I know you guys get hungry sometimes, but this is not that kind of hunger. I'm talking about hungry, perpetually hungry, thirsty, sacrificial. In a divided community, my friends, we need leaders who are selfless and willing to endure hardship. Selfless leadership. Too many times we see in the news the so-called Christian leaders whose agenda is self-promotion or self-enrichment. Too many times the followers of Jesus in the Western world are focused on self-preservation and comfort rather than kingdom advancement. Sacrifice. Number 6, Paul and Apollos were diligent. They were diligent. Verse 12, we work hard with our hands. Ministry is not glamorous, my friends. Being a Christian is not always glamorous. It's hard work. Some servant leaders work to the point of exhaustion and burnout. Burnout. 1 out of 10 pastors will retire as a pastor. 1 out of 10 pastors retire as a pastor, which means that 90% of those who start as ministers move on to some other jobs. 90% move out of ministry. Paul and Apollos walked the talk. They walked the talk. They were authentic. They were servants. They were transparent. They were countercultural, sacrificial, and diligent. And there's one more. There's one more. Number 7. They were an example of what it means to be a new kind of human being. A new kind of human being. I talked about that in my last message. A new kind of humanity. Verses 12 and 13. When we were cursed, we blessed. When we were persecuted, we endure it. And we were slandered, we answered kindly. See, they were reborn into a new kind of human being. Let me ask you this. Are you tired of the division around you? Are you tired of the bickering around you? Are you tired of the conflict around you? If you are, do what Paul and Apollos did. Bless when cursed. Endure when persecuted. Answer kindly when slandered. Because humanity cannot bless when cursed, cannot endure when persecuted, or answer kindly when slandered, we are ultimately left with one option. As humanity, we are left with one option, and that is to give up. To give up. Throughout history, people have tried to bless when cursed. They've tried to endure when persecuted or answer kindly when slandered, but they ultimately failed. They ultimately failed and came back to that one option, giving up. Giving up trying and surrendering. See, when you surrender, it matters who you surrender to. When surrender is your one and only option, it matters who you surrender to. From the world's perspective, surrender means despair, living a life of conflict, and self-destructing in the process. That's what it means from the world's perspective. But I have some good news. And when Christians talk about good news, this is what they're talking about. Instead of surrendering to despair, now you can surrender to God. We have that option now. There's one option, to surrender. Who you surrender matters. There you can surrender to God. When you do that, instead of despair, you find hope. Instead of conflict, you find authentic unity. And instead of self-destruction, you find eternal life. Jesus said, "Come to me. Just come to me. All of you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. In this context, my friends, in this context, the yoke is a metaphor for apprenticeship. Jesus is saying, "Come to me and be my apprentice. Take upon you this yoke of apprenticeship, and you will find freedom and rest." Therefore, the very first practical action you can take is this: become an apprentice of Jesus. Authentic unity requires unity with God through Jesus of Nazareth, his Son. We cannot experience authentic unity until we become a different kind of humanity, the kind who blesses when cursed, the kind who endures when persecuted, and answers kindly when slandered, even on social media? Are you tired? Are you tired of division and despair? Then become an apprentice of Jesus. And the way to do that, you start with a simple prayer. You just start talking to Him. A simple prayer, something like, Jesus, I want to follow you and I want to be your apprentice. That is so simple. But bring it from the heart. Let it come from your core of your being. Now let me tell you, you can pray this for the first time and you can pray it every day. You can pray it every day. You've been a Christian for many years. Brilliant! Jesus, I want to follow you today, and I want to be your apprentice today. This is your first step to living a new kind of life. The second practical step you can take is this: make time for transformation. Make time for transformation. Authentic unity requires learning a new lifestyle. I had a friend who said, well, you can't really teach an old dog new tricks. Really? No. That's what the culture says. We ought to be countercultural. Jesus said, learn from me. We can learn a new lifestyle. I don't care where you are. If you're a teenager, if you're a child, and I know there's some kids watching out there as well, or if you're 100, you can learn a new lifestyle. If you have ever applied yourself to pursuing any interests, any hobbies, you know that there's a learning involved. There's a learning curve involved. Apostle Paul provided both instruction and example. Any worthwhile pursuit requires the heart, the mind, and the body. The heart, the mind, and the body. The heart perseveres. The heart perseveres. Perseverance is daily strength from the Holy Spirit. The mind gives perspective. The mind gives perspective. Perspective comes from reading the Bible. And then the body practices. What we do matters. We practice. Our behavior matters. Our speech matters. We practice when we connect with one another. The heart, the mind, and the body. Perseverance, perspective, and practice. Make time. Make time for transformation. The third practical step you can take is focused on leaders and leadership. And by the way, all of you in some ways are leaders and have leadership. Here it is. Here's the practical step. Be faithful to Jesus, stay humble, and let Jesus evaluate your ministry effectiveness. Be faithful to Jesus, stay humble, and let Jesus evaluate your ministry effectiveness. The way you practice this is doing what Paul and Apollos did. That's the way you practice it. Practice the 7 examples I went through earlier. Here they are again. Authentic, servant, transparent, countercultural, sacrificial, diligent, and renewed. Renewed. And here's the practical thing for you. Write a sentence every day. Write a sentence every day about how each of these 7 examples will enable you to be faithful to Jesus, to stay humble, and continue in ministry. That means that each day you end up with 7 sentences. Each day you end up with 7 sentences. 7 sentences is not a lot to write down. They will sound something like this. To be authentic today, I will. To be a servant today, I will. To be transparent today, I will. To be countercultural today, I will. To be sacrificial today, I will. To be diligent today, I will. And to be renewed today, I will. Each sentence you write down should be specific to the particular day that you are facing. Authentic, servant, transparent, countercultural, sacrificial, diligent, and renewed. My friends, here's the bottom line. When it comes to ministry leaders and ministry leadership, which, by the way, it's your life, we need authentic unity. It is imperative that we align what we say with what we do. Our words need to be faithful to Jesus, filled with humility, and cautious regarding how we evaluate our ministry effectiveness. Our lives must be authentic, service-focused, transparent, countercultural, sacrificial, and diligent. We must live as new human beings, reborn in the family of God, blessing when cursed, enduring when persecuted, and answering kindly when slandered.